Hello, everybody. We are going to get started in just a minute. There's a couple more students who are going to be making their way in, but because Dr. Tsetse is so amazing, I have a fairly full introduction for him, so I will get going. Well, thank you so much for being here for our 22-23 Global Studies Speaker Series. This is our kickoff event. Later on, you can find out some more information outside. There's a handout about our next event in November. We'll have another one in January and one in March. And for anybody interested in global studies, there's also some information out there. We can talk more about that. So I'm going to waste no time introducing our speaker today. Dr. Tsetse is a Ghanaian-American with over 22 years of professional experience in water, sanitation, hygiene, environment program design, resource mobilization, strategy development, and implementation. He is a global lead for water, sanitation, hygiene, and environment at the Catholic Relief Services. Before joining Catholic Relief Services, he worked with the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, for over 14 years with long-term assignments in Ethiopia, Eritrea, Kenya, Sudan, Denmark, and the US. In addition to that work, he's also worked for overseas development in Sudan as a research scientist, environmental consultant, and exploration geologist in Ghana. Dr. Tsetse is a true Renaissance man. He started out with a bachelor's degree in geology from the University of Ghana, moved on to environmental master's degree in environmental engineering from the Technical University of Denmark, pursued an MBA in engineering management, and was not quite done with higher ed and had decided he needed a Ph.D. in environment and development from Leiden University. He's also written a book, Environmental Management in Development Countries in 2010, and lucky for us has chosen to reside in Indianapolis with his family, wife Courage, and 4 sons, Bernard, David, Emmanuel, and Joel. This is a true pleasure to have him here on campus. I'm looking forward to hearing all he has to say, and he very much enjoys questions. So please be prepared, especially if you're one of my students, to ask great questions after the talk. Dr. Tsetse.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Professor Jana. Thank you all for coming. Sometimes when I'm asked to complete a form and state my profession, sometimes I get backed up in terms of what do I really write, who am I really? So that's an issue that I have sometimes with filling forms. But that said, I want to take this opportunity to thank the whole of Marian University for allowing me to be here today, especially Professor Chris, who is not here this morning, and then Professor Diana. I remember the first time I came, we had this discussion, and she said, "Oh, I want to invite you for a global speaker series." I'm like, really? I thought she was joking, but here I am. So yeah, thanks so much for organizing that, and also for Ms. Beverly for all the logistics and getting me here today. Just to say, I grew up in Ghana, but I don't consider myself Ghanaian, more of American, and my job has taken me all around the world, different contexts and different situations. So I pretty much identify myself as an international nomad. But now I'm staying with my family in Fishers. So most of you, if you've been to Fishers High School, or you have a relative in Fishers High School, you know my sons. They all passed through there. The last one is a sophomore at IU Bloomington. So that's just by the way. Today, what I'm going to share with you, it's something that I thought of. And then again, she said, I'm free to speak to anything. So I chose this topic that relates to my area of work. So bear with me. And I think we have different category of people here. So I'll try as much as possible to be neutral and also present my thinking. As you can see from the title, this is Global Water Security Challenges and Problems. This is a big topic, and I'm not here today to say that I know everything about this topic. It's just to create some passion among you and also stir up some curiosity on the topic. So just bear in mind and just manage your expectation in terms of what you'll be hearing today. So the first slide I have, there's this word or approach that has been talked about globally water security, what exactly is it? What does it mean in terms of what we need to do? There are different definitions that we have out there, but I decided to take these two to give a sense of what exactly water security means in this sector. The first one talks about the reliable availability of acceptable quantity and quality for different types of use, health, livelihood, and development. And that's more or less the accepted definition from the UN community. And then the second one has to do with, similar to that, but it talks more about risk related to water. So you can see there are a lot of variables, a lot of thinking around what exactly water security here. Academics have different positions, and those who are actually in the front lines implementing activities will also tell you something different. But I would say the simple definition, just to simplify it, it's the interplay between demand and supply of water. That's simple terms. What activities can we as human beings undertake to ensure that there is enough water for whatever use that we want to use it for, with the right or acceptable quality? Quality varies, context and everything. So this is just to give you a simple, my take on what water security means, because I think it's very important for us to understand that. Then we'll be able to go into the other slides. So 3 parameters here: quality, quantity, and then the way we use it. And then a couple of things that we also need to know about water security. Water, I think this year's global theme for water, it's water, underground water. We all know water is finite. That means it's fixed. Just the way it's being used or supplied varies, but the whole system is fixed. So this is how so we can't add, in principle terms, additional quantity to water. So that's essentially what we have. So we need to be able to deal with it in such a way that we maintain the supply over time and also don't compromise the quality of it. Why do we have to do that? Because it relates to everything that we do everywhere, in every place. And I really want to say, water now, it's more or less, in my opinion, the key security threat that we have globally, second to air. And that has been recognized now. So you see in the other slides that I'll be sharing in a minute. So without water supply, we can't have good health. All the development activities that we're undertaking, be it agriculture, industrial development, et cetera, will not be able to go on. So that's why we have to take good care of it in terms of ensuring that where we get our supplies, there's always enough. Aquifers are replenished, and we also are very careful the way we use water, not to pollute it, but use it wisely. So this slide, I like that picture over there because it tells you how far communities can go to collect water. It's just a representation of what others go through. Some kids have to walk miles, especially girls, to be able to fetch water or get water for their daily use. So you can imagine the economic toll that this is having on society, even the health, educational benefits that the children are actually losing now, trying to get water. This is just drinkable water, not water for other extra use. So it's a lot out there that is going on. And it's all because there is not enough supply. We've increased demand. Or the third point, we don't even know what the supply is in different points. So a couple of things to think about as we go through today's session. Globally, it's been defined that if you receive or if you use 1,700 cubic meters of water, anything less than that is classified as water stress. In principle, what that means is it's below the balance line between supply and demand. So that is, this probably in most of the areas that we live here or in our houses will look like it's a small amount of water. But then, interestingly, more than 2 billion people around the world don't even have this 1,700 cubic meters per year. So that tells you the extent of problem that we are talking about now. So what actually causes this the water stress or water security that we are talking about? There are a lot of activities that we undertake and other natural phenomena that goes on that helps to, or not help, but speak to some of these issues. There's a lot of talk now about climate change and global warming. That is one of the many causes that we have, different climatic patterns that we have in different places. Temperature rise, that is key to ensuring that the water that we have, it's not the same. The other thing is the water pollution that goes on, both at home, in industrial development, and particularly in agriculture, the agricultural sector. You know, we use fertilizers, our farmers use fertilizer as part of the production chain. That goes into the soil, pollutes it. That is a major cause of water pollution. The other one, it's also the different mineralization processes that goes on in the formations where we have the aquifers. That is also a source of pollution. On the issue of pollution, what is coming up now with the drive for development in developing countries is the scale up of industrial work in the sectors of oil and gas, mining, and infrastructure development. All these activities contribute to a level of pollution that we are at different levels with different chemicals. So that is also a threat to our water security. The third point that I think most of us in this room are familiar with or practice, not consciously, is high water use. We leave the tap running, we water our lawns, we do other daily activities, forgetting that over 2 billion people around the world don't have access to 1,700 cubic meters of water. So that's another side. The other area related to high use that it's not seen, it's the leakage that we have in the distribution systems in the industrial world. It is actually estimated that 30% of treated water goes through leakage pipes, or it sort of disappears back into the system. That is also a good source. In the developing world, that percentage is even higher. So that's a good source of or cause of high pollution that we see. The third aspect or cause, which is now becoming a big problem, and that's on why I said, in my opinion, water has now become the major security issue. It's political unrest. If you are all following what is happening around the world, in the Middle East, and currently in Ukraine, you notice or you would have heard how important water is. UNICEF prepared a report on water in crisis, where water as a weapon of war, it's been advocated for. And why that? It's all because of access, how to get access to the water in an area where water is scarce, and also how different parties to different conflicts are exploiting such a situation to the host communities. So just imagine that you have a community where there is conflict or political unrest, and people living with disability are part of that community, which we all know. the impact such a situation will have on them. And not to talk about in developing countries and other places where women have to walk miles and miles and miles as part of their normal duties to collect the water. So this third point, or the fourth point, has become a hot topic these days. Ukraine is the same. A couple of weeks ago, I think the water system in Florida, I read from one of the news, was being sort of, they had some cyber-related threats. So you can imagine that these cyber hackers hack into our water supply, pollute it virtually or whatever they do to it. What will happen to us here? This is even in the advanced countries. How about those developing countries that we have here? So there's a good report about the whole water sector that I think I'll recommend. If you've not seen it, you read it, and as you go, you'll see a lot that has been written around what exactly the water situation is now. This report is normally prepared every year where different players within the water sector under the umbrella of the UN come to assess the situation of water that we have. This year's theme was on groundwater. How do we understand and make use of it? So I just want to give you a snapshot of the way the world looks like in terms of areas that are water stressed and areas that are relatively not, but hopefully heading towards that based on the different activities that we undertake. So you see, the red marks clearly shows the stream stress locations. And we are sort of in the medium, meaning the US in the medium based on this map. So even though we are not fully stressed or extremely stressed, we are heading towards the red color. And this is an area that we have to be concerned about and try to take steps to reverse that trend. If you see Northern Africa, currently, again, there's huge droughts in the corridors of Northern Africa, East Africa, Somalia, and people are dying because there's no rain, and the drought is so severe, food crops are not actually able to be planted. So there's a lot going on in that space. Australia is another area. So just to give you a snapshot of the different areas that are classified as hotspots. And if measures are not taken now, I'm afraid the US in 5 or 10 years' time will see ourselves in the red zone. Currently, this map shows that we look yellow, but if you want to sort of break it down, you see that there are different disparities in terms of how that covers or reflects in each state. This is the report that I referred to in my earlier presentation that UNICEF prepared. And this sort of speaks to the different countries in the Middle East and beyond that are classified as water stress and where conflict it's actually becoming an issue. So now we come home. The medium stress that I showed on the previous slides, you realize that if we want to unpack that, you see, this is how we look as of 2022, I believe. So all the red spots are the high stress areas, and the yellow are the medium to low. It tells you we are, as a country, in that situation that we have to be concerned about what is happening, especially the West Coast and Midwest, so yeah. And if you break this down further, I'm pretty sure by state, by county, that difference will still show up. I pulled up this work recently about the situation of water in the US. And I guess it's not surprising to see that we have some people in the US that do not have access to clean water, the 1,700 I talked about in the previous state. 2 million plus in the US. This is an alarming situation. So we need to sort of, so it gives you that all is not good, even within the US, and we need action at different levels. So now, I started off saying that this is a big topic. I'm not here claiming to know everything, but now I want to pivot to my area of work, which is mainly water for consumption and not for industrial development or agri. So this slide gives you an overview of the current cost that it's been estimated that will provide water supply per year. This is huge money. You look at for flood, you look at for watershed, this is enormous. Money that I don't think any government alone can contribute to this. So all hands have to be on deck. We all have to do our bit to be able to address the problem. It is huge. So, all that I've said so far clearly points to the fact that water security as it is now, based on the definition, the different actors that are involved, the different locations or the different disparities in location, it's a complex system. And I want to believe we all know what a system sort of looks like. Interaction of different players or processes and functions. So that means we need to take a systems approach to dealing with it. We need to make sure we identify the different components of the system and see how best we'll be able to tackle everything from different sides. Because if we deal with certain aspects of the system and leave other aspects out, our final outcome will not be able to change the system or propel it to the next level. So that's the end of the challenge. So if you, just to summarize before I move on to the next slide, I try as much as possible to unpack the definition of water security and how it relates to our context, the balance between supply and demand, making sure that we always don't go below that balance for all the activities that we want to use. Now, for the challenges, I tried my best to present to you or share with you that water security, it's a complex system with different interplays from different sectors because of the disparities in geography and in activities. So that's so how do we deal with complex systems? That's a big question for another day. I will not even try to go into that space. But now I'm going to take you to the opportunities that I see that we have or that different sectors or actors are actually engaging now to address some of the problems we have relating to water security. If you're all aware, the UN has the Sustainable Development Goals that was adopted in 2015. Luckily, I was part of the group that worked on or contributed behind the scene towards SDG 6 when I was in New York at that time. So they came up with 18 goals, and this diagram represents the different goals. Building on the previous slide that I shared, the complexity around systems, this slide shows how water is connected to the other 17 goals. And each goal, the contribution of water to each goal is a separate subject or area that we'll have to look at. But what I want to show here is water is at the center of all the goals. We race to it in one way or the other. So now I move into the area of water for human well-being. That is water for human consumption, not for agri, not for industrial development, but for what we drink. Yes, so that relates to SDG 6. And there are different components of that. The provision of it, which is having access to safe water, the quality aspect of the water, and also protecting the source of the water. These are different areas that have been identified as key to ensuring that there is water security in a particular location. And to do this, you have to make sure there are two conditions that have to be fulfilled. One, which is key, and currently our government is actually advocating for, is to engage local communities, because they know the problem, they have local knowledge, so we need to engage them, and currently the US government is actually doing that globally with its policy on localization. We engage them as actors to define the problem at the local level and collectively design actions and monitor that over time. This is not to say they can do it alone, because there are learnings happening in different aspects or different areas of the world. So how do local communities draw on those lessons or build on them to solve their problems? And that's where the second aspect comes in, international collaboration. Learn from South-South learning, other engagements, so that people with expertise will help provide input to how communities build their systems towards ensuring water security. So currently, this process has been very ambitious, but there is an upcoming UN conference on water. In 40 years, there has not been any, I would say, broad sector consultation on water as a goal. So this meeting in March next year is going to look at or take stock of what different actors have been doing in different sectors to address the challenges that we define. So it's something that we are all looking up to, because we believe that is a global platform that will help galvanize support or momentum for the area of water supply and addressing the water stress that we have globally. So it's a space that we hope that it will not be only for recommendations and meetings and chatting, but a platform that member states and participants will come up with concrete actions for all the different actors that we have, be it government, private sector, civil society, and even citizens ourselves. So that's some of the space that we are actually looking for as sector professionals. And this is just to give you some snapshot of what our government is doing now. Because of the recognition of the role of water in security, the White House recently, which I was part of, took a very concrete position on developing a national security plan, water security plan. And the idea is to sort of map out the different areas that we have or touches on water. How do the government draws on expertise in the different sectors that we have, IT, energy, agri, water supply, to have a national position on how we address water security. And that clearly shows political leadership in terms of sending signals towards the direction of the government. And I think it's something that we have to celebrate, because most governments currently are not actually doing that. The key takeaway from that initiative is bringing not only WASH professionals, but professionals from the military, all aspects, to deliberate and decide on how do we look at this, or reposition water as a strategic sector for the government. So that's something that Vice President Harris sort of rolled out a couple of weeks ago. And then the US aid also, they've developed with contribution from different sectors, a water security strategy. Essentially, that is the operational document, if you like, for the government. In the area of water for human consumption, but not for industrial development. So it sets out goals, and clearly in that, the issue of gender, disability, and others are considered, and sets targets in terms of how we meet this target as a country, and the different implementing modalities that we will have to take. So that is currently out there, and that guides whatever fund the taxpayers' money that we put into development. So these are two key strategic initiatives that are actually going on. I wouldn't say that USAID is a strategic initiative. That is more of a developmental, long-term, I would say, approach. But then every 4 years, there is a real look into how relevant these strategies are and a reformulation of them. So that happens over time. And I want to draw your attention to what governors are also doing. Given the severity of the situation, especially in California and Nevada and all other places, governors are now developing statewide water security plans or roadmaps, because they look at water as a threat, even for the consumption of people within their states. And I would say that's a clear initiative because it sets out which areas that water has to be used for and what it shouldn't be used for. And I want to believe this is going to continue to the other states as well, because that helps set the scene and gives political and high-level commitment to all the initiatives that have been undertaken. So what is CRS doing? Catholic Relief Services. I don't know if you've all heard. The Catholic Relief Services, it's an international development organization that was established by the Confederation of Bishops and Archbishops of the U.S. Our interventions are mainly outlooking out of the U.S., not within the U.S. And this is our vision. This is the vision of what we do. So we are part of the sector players in the water space. The key thing I want, which relates to what we stand for, or you stand for as Marian University, is what God's created, the Catholic social teachings that our agency's work is built on. We want to make sure that everything that God has provided, we are stewards of them, and then the issue of subsidiarity is what we strive to implement to its best. So this is the mission or vision of CRS, the organization that I currently work for and lead the water program globally. This is our approach. This slide shows our CRS strategy to address in water security. This afternoon, I had an interaction with some students, and I was telling them the different areas of work, and even with Prof. Adiana, and then also Prof. Zach, that there are three components of our work that we actually focus on. One, it's the water and landscapes. That is essentially to take care of, where our sources, protect it in terms of quantity and quality. And we do this hand in hand with our colleagues in agriculture and other sectors. So that's one pillar of what we do. The other, it's the normal services that we provide: water supply to households, water supply to schools, and then water supply to healthcare facilities. So that's also another aspect. And then the third aspect, which relates to the previous three slides, governance and political leadership, it's what we have labeled as governance and finance. Because without funds, we'll not be able to implement. So these are the three main pillars of our strategy up to the year 2030. You will notice that around the circle, we have a couple of cross-cutting issues that we've labeled around. So those are issues that we also address as part of our strategy. For example, if we went to a village to provide water supply, we'll make sure the water, it doesn't create conflict. We'll address gender issues. We engage youth and other people within the community, and also make sure that the infrastructure is climate resilient. So that's more or less, we present a package as part of our solutions and interventions. So this is just to give you a sense of what we achieved last year, fiscal year. We provided water supply to close to 3.3 million people around the world, and it was more than 266 wash and healthcare facilities. I want to make a point on the healthcare facilities because we have an initiative with the Vatican, the Dicastery, where they are actually supporting us with our wash and healthcare facilities, helping with high-level advocacy, and also making sure that our other faith-based organizations are engaged in providing services. Currently, we are active in 27 countries. That's why we have specific wash programs. That said, there are other countries that we have nutrition, health, livelihood, and other programs that wash or water supply, it's a component of. But these 27 are specific WASH countries that we have around the world. So, this is to us, myself and all of you. Having listened to all this presentation and everything that we've had so far, the key thing is we are all stakeholders in this situation. We need to act as one, sit around the table and identify what exactly my role is and what can I bring to the table. Literally, every dime that you contribute, and every time that you turn off your tap to reduce the treated water that just flows out, or reduce the amount of time you spend showering, contributes in one way or the other. So don't underrate those actions, because they all end up to reducing the bigger problem that we have. I took out this publication just to show how the private sector is actually now getting engaged in the provision of services. A couple of weeks ago, Water.org promised to contribute in close to $1 billion. Amazon is also coming up into the space. They've also offered some money. And most of these multilateral companies and other big companies are actually entering the space, mainly through their corporate responsibility area of work. But I still believe there's a lot of work that has to be done, given how central water is to what we all do, especially companies that are into using water to do a lot of production processes. The other thing is we also have to value water. Currently, there's a lot of work that has been done in the other sectors, and that's why we normally see that the water sector, in terms of what we know, the value of water, even though we know it's a common good, doesn't compare to other sectors like energy, telecommunication and others. But we need to do a better work in valuing the resources that we have, bearing in mind that it is common for all of us, for the current generation and also for future generation. I will not go to the scarce resource, but then the last point that I will talk about it's the use of data and technology. The theme for this year's World Water Day was groundwater invisible. Currently, as we speak, there's a lot of gap in terms of our understanding of the freshwater resources that we have. With the development of technology, satellite imagery, other things, we believe this will help not to increase the supply, but to better define the water resources or the aquifers that we have. So at least you'll be able to know the potential of all the aquifers and plan accordingly. The same technology and data will be able to help us, model how water is used through different pipelines and be able to improve efficiency and other things. So data in its sense and technology is key to addressing the water security in our opinion. If you look at the drought areas in Northern Africa, for example, the aquifers there are estimated to be close to 4,000, 10,000 feet below underground. So if you spend like close to $10 million or $5 million and you miss the aquifer, it tells you how much you've lost. So, but using satellite technology and other communication, if you're able to locate, you get the best out of that, and then you'll be able to distribute for other use as well. So these are the key areas that as stakeholders, not as individuals, we need to be brainstorming around and trying to find solutions every time to be able to improve our understanding of the supply and also better use to reduce demand. So that's the end of my presentation. This is my name, my email, and everything. So I'll stop here for questions. Feel free to ask any question. I'm more than happy to answer. Thank you very much for your attention. cubic meters. No, per year. That's.
How much is that for a non-science person? Is that like a swimming pool? Why are you
Okay, no, that's a
great American.
that's a good question. It's about 6 to 8 glasses of water a day. Yeah, that's about 6 to 8 glasses of water a day. Normal glass size water a day. Yeah.
Many of the states out west have encouraged their homeowners to change their yards over to desert-type lawns. How do you see the irrigation of yards and golf courses? How do you look at that type of water use?
Thank you very much. I'll share my personal opinion because that is something that will require some state and county level regulations. But personally, I don't water my lawn. I don't because I have to walk the talk, and I don't, and because the amount of water you use. Bear in mind, the water that we use is already treated. It has gone through a whole lot of processes. Money has been spent. So it's something that we have to try and have a change of mindset, and it will take a bit of time. But I'm sure the awareness is now being created. Clearly, we know use of water to water our lawns, golf courses. It's something that we can try to improve. But again, there are different stakeholders involved in that space that will have to deliberate. I know in some countries it's been banned. You can't, or there's a penalty you have to pay. If I'm correct, I think California, there's been a time where they've actually tried to regulate the amount of water that you use to water your lawn. So these are measures that are actually listed as part of water high use that we'll have to take. But that has to be localized depending upon the context and also the regulations and policies that we have at the local level. Yes, thank you.
Water is finite. What percent of the water is polluted, and is that increasing or decreasing, or do we know?
Good question. It's fine. No. Yeah, his question is, water is finite. So is it the percentage that is being polluted that is increasing or decreasing? And to answer your question, it's the percentage that is being polluted that is increasing. That percentage, it's increasing. So that's why we will have to reverse the trend. But that said, that is on the global scale. But if you want to localize it based on country, state, or a city, you have different approaches. But globally, that is the trend, that it's being polluted depending upon the different chemicals that are being used and the type of activities that are being done. So we need to make sure we improve the quality. Because having water that is not of an acceptable quality is of no use.
I don't know if you know this answer, but there was on your map with the United States, and down like the Mississippi around that region, and then around the Lake Michigan. Why are those areas like specifically where there's water stress, like high stress areas?
Oh, your question again? Sorry, I didn't. The Mississippi area. Why is it water stress? Yeah, normally the map that you see, the first one that I showed for the world, you see that the U.S. was yellow. But when we sort of looked at the details, so that Mississippi area, if you want to zoom into it again, you see that there are different pockets. There are some areas that are no. What they do is they calculate the water resource per the population in a particular area. So that also gives you an idea of the water that is being used. But it shows you that what you see, if you want to zoom into it, there will be different levels of stress, water stress in that space. I hope this answers your question a bit.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, it makes sense. What we do is, we have, I don't know if you're familiar with the Caritas system. We have we work with the local Caritas, the church-based organization in every country that we go. So what we do is we sit down with them and other stakeholders and actors to define the problem or the need in that particular. We don't actually implement as CRS, we implement through our partners, the Caritas and other CBOs that we have on ground. And I would say that is one of our comparative advantage. So if you look at our efficiency rate in terms of what we get, currently I think 98% plus of the money that we get from donors goes directly into programming. So we don't have a lot of overhead cost. And that's one of our strengths.
Yeah, there is a very strong controversy regarding the amount of water which is needed to produce and to consume meat. So this is a very critical aspect here in the USA where the meat consumption is very high. So changing the diet, which I don't know if that's possible or not, but that would change. Things would change significantly in that aspect if there is a significant change in the diet.
I don't know if I got your question right, but maybe just position your question. And there are two schools of thoughts. Probably my colleagues in the academic will help me in this within the environmental space. There are those who advocate for economic development hand in hand with environment, and there are some who sort of advocate for strictly social goods and environment. So, that balance will have to be determined at every point in time. And that's where policy comes in. The government comes in to set agenda, give a direction for others to also play. But that will require some form of individual change of eating habit, or maybe government coming out with a policy. Again, local governments are better in a position to do this, but we just have to bear in mind there are two different schools in terms of how we address the environmental related problems. Yeah.
I have a couple of questions, but they're both kind of looking towards the future. One is, once water is addressed, what would be kind of the number 2 goal? What becomes the next top priority? And then, based on our current rate of consumption, the planet wouldn't sustain everyone to basically live an American lifestyle. So what would it look like? What, in your mind, does the future look like if everyone is living a sustainable life? What does that look like in the day-to-day?
I wish I could predict the future. But I think one thing I always say is, if ceteris paribus, if what you're saying is like it happens that we have, but we just have to remember that we are living in a transformational world. So systems, as you see them, subcomponents, they react, there's a lot of transformation that goes on. So predicting, we can predict for modeling and planning, but the deep question that you ask will determine what the transformational change will happen in society. And at that time in future, what is being considered. But currently, as I speak to you, there are two things. Air, which is free. Water is the next. And I try to demonstrate how water is linked to every other thing. Now, it's because we have in our mind that water is supposed to be free. I know when people are paying for water in some parts of the world, they see it as a burden. But the fact is, it's not free. And it's time that we place value on it, and we think about how we consider that in our development. So to your question, that is a deep question that I wish I could predict, but just remember that we're living in a transformational society that is made up of complex systems. So with that, as to how that evolves, that will determine what will be the next priority for those who will be alive around that time.
Thank you, Dr. Tsetse. Let's give Dr. Tsetse another round of applause.